first major news story tonight. I think it's one that a lot of people have been talking about. Significant shake-up on the SmackDown creative team. Brian James, who we all know as Road Dogg, has apparently resigned from his position on the WWE creative staff. This was first reported by bodyslam.net that they had parted ways. And then some other outlets came in with extra detail. Wrestling Observer newsletter has added that James made the decision to leave himself following his annual performance review. According to Fightful, he's been expressing unhappiness for a while. For a little bit of history, he was brought back into the WWE fold after an absence in August 2022 as senior vice president of live events. Of course, live events have dwindled to a tiny trickle these days. So most recently, he was named as one of the head writers of SmackDown last year. And our second story will tie into this as well, but just to give some context to where he sat in the hierarchy, both SmackDown and Raw have their own creative writing teams and head writers. But above them sits a guy called Ryan Ward, and he's the vice president of creative writing. Above Ward is Bruce Pritchard, and I think Ed Koskey is kind of at that level as well, where he's pitching it in a higher level. And then above them in this pyramid, of course, is Uncle Paul, the head of creative. So whether or not this makes a big difference to SmackDown or not is maybe up for question. I think he's probably the bigger of the two names we're about to talk about in the early portion of the news because he's an ex-talent. And we all know him. We all know the Road Dogg. And, of course, lately, he's featured fairly heavily in WWE Unreal. And I wondered, Way, what you thought about all of this and also his portrayal in Season 2 of WWE Unreal. I've been watching it and, of course, following your and John's reviews of it on a weekly basis. I'm not sure he came over as in the best light in this season, particularly, I guess, in the R-Truth episode where he's kind of depicted as being somewhat unable to separate his personal friendship from his creative duties and so on.
Yeah, I almost see him portrayed as a bit of a clown of the writing room, you know, like the most telling scene of the entire season was actually in the Chelsea Green episode where his real just like he says, why don't we put the title on Chelsea? And Levesque gives him the follow-up, well, then, okay, what do we do with that afterwards? Or something to that effect. And James just has no comeback. He's like, I don't know. It just did not make him look great. But, I mean, that's all sort of, that affects public perception. And I think, like, with the quality of SmackDown over the past year being what it already has been, public perception as it relates to, you know, Brian James in this role has not been good anyway. I think Unreal just kind of exacerbated it and made people a lot more vocal. I don't know how much of any of that reaction had to do with like maybe what you would assume to be, you know, a stripping back of, I guess, like responsibility or maybe even just influence, you know, on this team that's led to his creative frustration, perhaps. But I feel like the results are enough to justify whatever decisions have been made to force some type of creative shakeup that might have taken place over the past, you know, few months. Look no further than the WrestleMania ticket sales. And obviously that's not even the main thing. The main thing is the pricing and just, you know, the fact that they're using another location. But I do think, especially on the SmackDown side of things, you could point towards a lack of development of a lot of, like, you know, mid-tier stars, maybe even look towards your main title program guys as one of the sore spots of the entire company. And for whatever reason, whether, you know, maybe that would have had something to do, if there is, in fact, you know, a sort of removal of influence for Brian James over the past year.
I think somewhat, I had a look, you know, a bit of a dig around on Reddit to see what online sentiment was. This is not scientific, but there's a sort of a split. There's some people who are sort of celebrating this as a new era for SmackDown. I think those people are wrong. I don't think that this guy alone has that much influence on this one show. As we outlined, there are several layers of creative above him who are looking at a big picture going into each PLE. And there are others who think he was set up to be a scapegoat in the Unreal show.
Yeah,
and I have some sympathy with at least why people might think that, because we're getting slivers of conversations from the writers' room, and I'm not even certain all of the writers who would normally be there are in these. You know, how much of this is absolutely as it happened, or some of it's reconstructed. I don't know. And those slivers don't show him in the best light. And I'm sure he has good moments, or he probably wouldn't have kept his job for, a year otherwise.
Perhaps, yeah. Like all we know of the writer's room is what we see in that show, which is heavily edited. So we can't really say for sure. I mean, I look forward to seeing if there's any sort of like real notable change, on the product as a result of a move like this. But even then, you can't really say for sure that it's directly as a result of Road Dogg no longer being on the staff.
Agreed. Well, moving from SmackDown to Raw with news of an internal promotion, Alexandra Williams revealed, really via her own LinkedIn account, that she's been promoted. Oh, and a post on X as well. Yep. She's been promoted to a vice president rank within the company and lead writer of Raw. She's been with the company since October 2020, and she comes from a film and television background. A member of SAG-AFTRA, an ex-actor of some sort as well. She was promoted to senior writer and producer in February of 2024, so a couple of years ago. And just like the SmackDown side, she'll operate under Ryan Ward in that creative pyramid. In her own words from her updated job description, she describes the role as VP and lead writer for WWE's flagship live program. I oversee all creative development for Monday Night Raw. I pitch to and collaborate with executive leadership and a cross-functioning writing team to conceptualize and execute week-to-week storylines, character arcs, and premium live event build-ups. She goes on to talk about her analytical approach and to audience trends and viewership data and so on. And again, I think we may have seen her on Unreal in a non-speaking role. There is a woman who looks like that, I've noticed, in that room on occasion, but we don't seem to hear from her on that show. It just goes to show how heavily edited it is. There's 5 or 6 episodes, and they're trying to tell their own story, probably with people that we would know better. Yep. Bobby Roode gets more screen time, and I think he's probably a more junior person, but I think that's just part of it. But again, online sentiment is very positive about a woman taking the lead writer role on the flagship program. The women's division on Raw is better. She has been apparently involved in some of the main event build-ups, some of working with Punk, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so people are positive about this promotion. And I guess, we'll see where Raw goes. It is certainly the better product, I think most people would say, from week to week at the moment.
Certainly. Sure. Yeah. Again, she's one part of this giant machine. And I'm even just not even talking about TKO as a whole, but just this writing staff, which seems to have several people that are in charge above Alex Williams anyway. So again, the extent of like her responsibilities, we're not really privy to that information. It remains to be seen if the product is noticeably different with her now in this position. Again, we can maybe speak from like a public, public reaction perspective that like having a female attached to the role right now and having it like publicly known in a way that it feels a bit more like deliberate than, let's say, like, with a Ryan Ward or like with like some of these other writers who might have been attached to the role previously. I wonder if is in and of itself a form of PR from the WWE to be able to, like, without publicly announcing it, but announcing it via this person's LinkedIn that, hey, for all of you complaining that we might not be giving enough like voices in the writers' room, well, our VP of writing on Raw is is a woman now. I wonder if there's an element to that. And
perhaps at least in the promotion of it, or the letting it be known to, I think it's John Alba who was put on to this, this LinkedIn profile, for example. But of course, it's public there on X as well, and whether or not she'd been prompted to do this, to put a post out, we'll never know. We'll never know. But
that's a very pessimistic, a way of looking at it, as it even comes out of my mouth now. I have no doubt that she's incredibly qualified for this role.
I don't think you or I have any doubt that this is a merited posting. I think it's the publicity surrounding it that obviously some reporters have been
But this is an important thing to talk about as it relates to this company and the controversies that it is currently, a part of. Having like women in prominent positions in VP sort of roles, I think, is ultimately maybe it works to their benefit from a PR perspective in some ways.
The Post Wrestling Cafe is your one-stop shop for all of the coverage that Post Wrestling has to offer. 2 big rewind-aways this month with WWF Insurrection from May of 2002. This UK-only pay-per-view featured the Raw brand going overseas and ending with the infamous plane ride from hell. Then we're going to take a look at AWA's Super Sunday from April of 1983. A new edition of Talk Can Be Yours, plus MCU Later, Book Club, and coverage of UFC 326, TNA Sacrifice, and of course, XL editions of Rewind a Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown with all the news of the day. Join now at postwrestlingcafe.com.